My name is Mark Branson. I'm 44 years old. I live just outside of Chicago with my wife, Hannah, and our two kids, Jaden, who's 13, and Lily, who just turned 8. I've been working in logistics for over 15 years now. Not some fancy desk job. I'm a shift lead at a mid-sized warehouse. I handle deliveries, manage the floor team, load times, that kind of stuff. It's a solid job, pays decent, keeps me moving, and honestly, I like it. I've got a good life. I mean that. My wife's a school teacher, first grade. We've been together since our 20s. We've built something stable. We've been through soft, sure, like any couple, but right now we're good. Most nights are just dinner dishes, helping the kids with homework, and maybe a little Netflix if we don't both crash out by 10. Nothing flashy but real, and I've never wanted anything more. This all started about 2 months ago. It was a Monday, the kind where you spill your coffee in the car, the scanners jam, and two trucks show up late. I was walking the floor doing my rounds when my supervisor, Ronnie, calls me over and says, "Hey, Mark, meet our new trainee, Allison." I turned, and there she was, young, maybe early 20s, hair in a loose bun, bright green eyes, confident stance. She held out her hand, gave me a quick smile, and said, "Nice to meet you. I've heard you're the one who actually runs this place." I laughed it off. I mean, it was clearly meant as a compliment, but something about her energy stuck. She wasn't nervous, not like most interns. She had this presence. I chalked it up to Gen Z confidence and moved on. Her first few days, she shadowed me directly. She said she was finishing a logistics degree and needed field hours. That was fine with me. I've trained dozens of interns over the years. I showed her the inventory system, the forklift schedule, order processing. She was quick to learn, asked the right questions. I won't lie, it was kind of nice having someone so sharp around, but I kept it professional. Then little things started to happen. Nothing huge, just shifts. She'd linger when we were done reviewing something. She started showing up 5 minutes early and hanging near my station with a coffee in hand, always one for me too. She'd laugh a little harder at my dumb jokes than anyone else. Once when I told her I liked her boots genuinely, they were unusual. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Didn't peg you as someone who notices details." I smiled, didn't say anything, but in my head I remember thinking, okay, that's not just a thank you. I still didn't make anything of it. I figured she was just friendly or one of those people who doesn't realize how they come across. But then came the photo. One afternoon she pulled out her phone and said, "My roommate says you look like this actor from some show. Here, let me show you." I leaned in to see, and yeah, he had a similar beard. Whatever. We laughed, but then she turned her camera around and snapped a photo of the two of us. "Now I have proof," she said. "Don't worry, I won't post it." And I just stood there for a second thinking that was weirdly intimate for work. Still, I said nothing. I went home that evening to the smell of pasta and garlic bread, Lily singing to herself in the living room, and Hannah standing at the stove in her messy ponytail and sweatshirt. She smiled when she saw me like always. "Hey babe, long day," she asked. "Yeah," I said, kissing her on the cheek. "Long but fine." I didn't mention Allison. Why would I? Nothing had happened. Nothing was going to happen. It was just a new intern, just a weird Monday, right? The next couple of weeks, things got strange. I kept telling myself it was all in my head, that I was overthinking it. But deep down, I knew something was different. Allison didn't act like an intern anymore, not with me. It wasn't about the work. She was doing fine on time, picked things up fast, asked smart questions. She got along with everyone. But the way she acted around me, the way she looked at me, it started to make me feel like I was being watched for something else. Like I wasn't just her trainer. Like I was the reason she came in early or stayed late. One morning, I walked into the break room earlier than usual for me, and she was already there leaning on the counter, sipping coffee. Just us. She didn't even say good morning, just looked up at me and said, "Your wife pack your lunch today?" I gave a half smile. "She does sometimes, not always." Allison raised an eyebrow and said, "If someone made me lunch every day, I don't think I'd ever complain about anything." I said nothing, just poured coffee, tried not to look in her direction. But I could feel it, that energy again, like a line had been crossed, and she was waiting to see what I'd do next. After that, she kept finding excuses to stay near me. She started volunteering to help with things she didn't need to be part of inventory checks, truck inspections, even late-day shipments. Once we were out back checking off a late order and everyone else had clocked out, the sun was setting orange light hitting the side of the building. She handed me a clipboard and said, "It's kind of nice out here, huh? Quiet. Just us." I said, "Yeah, peaceful." She looked straight at me and said, "You ever think about what your life would look like if you weren't married?" I froze for a second. "Where'd that come from?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She shrugged. "Just people settle young, and sometimes I wonder if that's a good thing." I cleared my throat. "I was 24. We were ready." She smiled again. "That's sweet. Most guys wouldn't say that." Then she took a step closer, not a big one, just enough that I noticed enough to feel the air shift. "Mark," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Is she home?" I looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" She dropped her voice to a whisper. "Because I've been thinking about you all day." There was a silence, a long one. My chest tightened, not out of excitement, not out of attraction, but out of pure, clean panic. That was the moment I realized this wasn't harmless anymore. This wasn't flirting. This wasn't a misread. This was a situation. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her for a second, then turned and walked back inside. Didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice, just left. I barely slept that night. I stared at the ceiling next to my wife, feeling like I was already doing something wrong, even though I hadn't touched her. The worst part of me didn't hate the attention. That's what scared me. At work the next day, I avoided her as best I could. I gave her other tasks, sent her to shadow with Ronnie. I tried to be cold professional, but Allison wasn't stupid. She felt the shift. That afternoon, she caught me outside near the loading dock. No one else was around. I was smoking a cigarette, a habit I'd quit 5 years ago. I bummed one off a guy that morning. My hand was shaking. "You're mad at me," she said. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "I didn't mean to make things weird. I'm sorry." I looked at her finally. "What did you think was going to happen, Allison?" "I don't know, nothing. I feel something and I thought maybe you did too." I looked away. "You're 23. So, so I have a wife and two kids, and I don't know what kind of movie you think this is, but it's not going to end like that." She went quiet, her jaw clenched, and she said something that stuck with me for days. "Maybe you're not the guy I thought you were." She walked off and I just stood there not knowing whether to feel insulted, relieved, or completely destroyed inside. That night, Hannah asked if I was okay. I told her I was just tired. She brought me tea and sat next to me on the couch with her legs folded under her, like she always did. "Anything happen at work?" she asked gently. I paused. "Nothing important." And she believed me. Of course she did, because nothing had happened. But everything had changed. I wish I could say things got easier after that. I told myself I'd handled it, walked away, shut it down, end of story. But it wasn't the end, not even close. What came next wasn't about Allison anymore. It was about me, the version of myself I didn't like looking at, the one I hadn't met until this whole thing started. After that afternoon by the loading dock, I tried to reset. I avoided being alone with her, kept things short, direct. Gave her the most boring routine tasks I could think of. Told Ronnie she should start rotating with other team leads just for broad experience. He didn't question it, and she got the message. For the next few days, Allison kept her distance. No more coffee, no more notes or side comments. She didn't even say hi when we passed in the hall, just silence, cold professional. You'd think that would be a relief, but it wasn't. That silence was heavy. It followed me home into the kitchen, into my bedroom, into my sleep. It forced me to confront things I didn't want to, like the truth that part of me missed the attention. Not her, not really, just the feeling of being wanted, of being noticed, of feeling something electric. I love my wife, God, I do. But we've been married over 20 years, and marriage, real marriage, it's not all sparks and surprises. It's consistency, it's safety, it's love, built over 1,000 grocery trips and forgotten anniversaries and wiping the kids' noses at 300 a.m. Allison made me feel something I hadn't felt in a while. That was the truth. I didn't act on it, but I felt it. And that fact alone made me feel like I had already failed. One Thursday after the shift, I sat in my truck for almost 30 minutes before driving home, just sat there staring at the wheel. I kept thinking about the moment when she whispered to me, "Because I've been thinking about you all day." Why did she say that? What did she want from me? Why couldn't I stop playing it in my head? When I finally walked through the front door, dinner was already on the table. Jaden was telling Lily to stop humming, and Hannah was wearing that old blue hoodie she always wore when she was tired. She smiled when she saw me. I smiled back. Everything looked exactly the same. And that's when I realized something. I was living two lives, one at work full of noise and temptation and questions, and one at home, steady, warm, predictable. And I didn't know how to stand in both without falling apart. That weekend, Hannah suggested we go to this little family-owned diner we used to visit when we first got married. She got her usual French toast with extra syrup and asked me about work. I lied, said things were fine, and then she said something that hit me hard. "You've been distracted lately. You okay?" I paused too long. She looked up. I said, "Yeah, just tired." She nodded but didn't press. She trusted me. I made it worse. Monday came and I tried to refocus to drown myself in routine, but mid-morning I had to run through the shipment logs, and the only available person to check inventory with me was, of course, Allison. I almost asked Ronnie to switch her out. Almost, but I didn't. We walked the aisles in silence, scanning barcodes, making check marks. Her ponytail was tucked into her hoodie, and she didn't look at me once until we got to the last row. She finally spoke. "Look, I'm not trying to ruin anything for you." I didn't answer. She stepped into the gap between two stacks of pallets, just enough so no one could see us from the front. "I know what this looks like, but I'm not crazy, and I'm not a kid. I know what I felt wasn't one-sided." I stared at her. My throat was dry. She wasn't wrong, and that scared me. "Allison," I said, "you're smart. You're capable. You've got your whole damn life ahead of you. And yeah, I felt something, but that's all it was, a feeling. And feelings don't justify destroying people." She looked down for a moment, then back at me. "Maybe. Or maybe they show us what we're really missing." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. That night, I stood in the shower longer than usual, water running, forehead pressed to the tile heart, racing not because I had done something wrong, but because I knew how close I had come and how easy it would have been to keep going. Just one message, one coffee, one lunch, and I realized I had to make a decision not about her, but about me. The kind of man I actually was and the kind of man I wanted to be when my daughter looked at me 10 years from now. It was a Tuesday when everything came to a head. Cold morning, overcast sky, rain in the forecast. I remember because I left my jacket in the truck and was cursing myself under my breath while walking in. Everything felt like routine again. Clock and grab coffee, check the incoming shipments. Allison hadn't been on my mind as much over the past few days, not as intensely, at least. She had been assigned to a different team for the week under Ronnie now, and we hadn't spoken since that conversation by the pallets. I thought maybe the whole thing had just run its course, that maybe I dodged it. I was wrong. I was alone in the back office checking shipment discrepancies. I left the door half open, didn't think anything of it, and suddenly I heard a knock. I looked up Allison. I didn't say anything at first, just nodded slightly. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "I'm leaving next week," she said. "Ronnie's moving me to a different facility for the rest of my training." I blinked. "Okay." She looked nervous for the first time, not flirty, not smug nervous. "I wanted to see you before I go without the weird tension. Just to say thanks for teaching me. I learned a lot." I stayed seated. "You're welcome." She hesitated. "That's all you're going to say, but what do you want me to do, Allison?" She stared at me for a long moment, then said that I wasn't crazy, that there was something real even if nothing happened. I let out a slow breath and stood up, not aggressively, just so I wasn't below her. "There was something," I said quietly. "That's true, but it wasn't a future. It wasn't love. It was temptation." She nodded. "Okay." I almost gave in, I added. "I'll be honest about that. But then I pictured my daughter at your age. And I pictured some man in his 40s entertaining the same thoughts I was having. And I hated myself for it." She swallowed hard. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. That's fair. You're not the villain here, I added. You're young, curious, maybe lonely. But I have a life I've built with someone who's trusted me for 20 years. I'm not throwing that away for them fantasy, not now, not ever. She looked down, then nodded again. Thank you for telling me the truth. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Without turning around, she asked quietly, You ever going to tell your wife? No, I said because I didn't cheat, and because telling her would only hurt her for something that didn't happen. Take care of her, she said softly, and she walked out. And just like that, it was over. But the storm in my chest stayed. That night at home, everything looked exactly the same as always. The kids arguing over who got the last breadstick, Hannah grading papers at the table, the TV on low in the background. Life was moving, but I was still frozen inside. Hannah looked up at me while I stared blankly at the plate in front of me. You okay? She asked, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, just tired. Might turn in early tonight. She smiled. I'll be up in a bit. I went to bed, lay there with my eyes open, thinking about everything I hadn't said, all the things I almost did, and the things I chose not to. It felt like I had barely won a war no one would ever know about. But I won, and that mattered. The next morning, Allison was gone, transferred. She left no messages, no notes, no pictures, just silence. Ronnie mentioned it in passing, and I just nodded. Hope it works out for her, I said, then moved on. A few days later, Hannah and I took the kids to a movie, nothing fancy, just a cartoon. Lily grabbed my hand in the theater and leaned her head on my arm. Jaden was too cool for that now, but he sat beside me, quietly chewing popcorn, occasionally glancing over when something funny happened. And Hannah smiled at me in the dark like she had 1,000 times before, like she always did. And in that moment, I felt peace, not excitement, not adrenaline, but peace. And it felt better than anything Allison ever offered. A few weeks passed, no drama, no messages, no unexpected visits, just silence. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't ache, but settles in and reminds you you're back where you're supposed to be. Allison was gone from the warehouse, transferred like she said. She didn't leave a trace behind, no text, no glance, no lingering perfume in the hallway, just gone. And still the ghost of that moment, her standing in my office asking, You ever going to tell your wife, hung in the back of my head longer than I expected. But I didn't tell Hannah, not because I was hiding, but because I was protecting, because I knew what it would do to her, because some truths aren't about coming clean. They're about knowing who you are, what you didn't do, and what you'll never do. And I didn't cheat, not once, not even close, even when it would have been easy. Instead, I kept showing up every day, to work, to dinner, to bedtime stories, to marriage. And slowly something in me started to change, not because of Allison, but because of what she forced me to face, the parts of myself I'd let go on autopilot for too long. I started taking my wife's hand more often, hugging my kids a little longer before school. I left my phone in another room during dinner. It wasn't some grand gesture, just presence being there fully. A month after Allison left, Hannah and I went away for the weekend, just the two of us. My sister watched the kids. It wasn't fancy, a small cabin up near Lake Geneva. We grilled burgers, drank cheap red wine, and talked under the string lights behind the porch. And at one point, I'll never forget this, she looked at me and said, I don't know what's shifted, but you've been different lately, like you're really here again. I didn't know what to say at first. My throat closed up for a second. Then I looked at her and said, I almost lost something, not because I did anything wrong, but because I stopped noticing how right this is. She just smiled. I'm glad you didn't. We didn't talk about it further. She didn't ask questions. I didn't offer details. And maybe she knew more than she let on. Maybe she just felt it in her gut the way women sometimes do. But she chose to trust me, and I chose to deserve it. That Monday back at work, everything went on like normal. Same coffee, same forklift, beeping down aisle 6, same late orders from the same clueless vendors. But I felt lighter, like a man who had walked to the edge of a cliff and stepped back. No one else ever know what happened. Not my coworkers, not my friends, not even my brother, who I tell everything. Because sometimes real stories, the ones that matter, aren't the ones you brag about. They're the ones that stay between you, your conscience and the quiet. And no, I never saw Allison again. I sometimes wonder where she ended up, whether she meant it all, whether it was about me or just something she was trying to feel in her own life. But I don't wonder for long because I have everything I need right here, a woman who still kisses me on the shoulder when I'm half asleep, kids who roll their eyes when I make corny dad jokes but still come to me when something's wrong, a job that's not glamorous but honest, and a version of myself I can live with. There's this idea people love to push that life's about chasing what's exciting, what's new, what gives you butterflies. But I think real life is about the choice you make when no one's looking, when no one would blame you for slipping, when your heart races and your hands sweat and someone whispers something they shouldn't, and you look back at all you've built and say no, not because you're a saint, but because you've already found what matters and you're not letting go. I didn't fall, I didn't fail, I walked away and went home. Mark Branson's story delivers a powerful lesson. True strength lies in choosing loyalty and integrity when temptation tests your resolve. As a devoted husband and father, Mark faced an unexpected challenge when Allison, a young trainee, stirred feelings he hadn't confronted in years. Her subtle advances, coffee-lingering glances, and bold confessions threatened to unravel the life he'd built with Hannah. Yet Mark's refusal to cross that line, despite the allure of attention, reveals the courage it takes to honor commitments. His internal struggle, marked by sleepless nights and raw honesty with himself, underscores that temptation isn't the enemy. It's what you do with it that defines you. By stepping back from Allison's pull, Mark reaffirmed his love for his family, finding peace in the quiet moments of routine dinner with his kids, Hannah's trusting smile. This story teaches us that real love isn't about chasing fleeting thrills, but protecting what's sacred even when no one's watching. It's a call to examine our choices, to value the steady beauty of commitment, and to embrace the hard-won peace of doing what's right. Mark's journey reminds us that the greatest victories are often silent fought within and rewarded by a life you can stand by with pride. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between temptation and loyalty? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how you found your strength. If this tale of resilience and love touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and join our community for more stories that inspire. Let's keep celebrating the power of staying true together.